I practiced clinical orthodontics for 38 years, and I could tell you, practice growth feels like success until the schedule starts running you. Today's conversation explores how one orthodontist regained control and built a more predictable practice. Stay tuned. Welcome to the Golden Age of Orthodontics. One thing we know is that the future of orthodontics is digital. For me, the KLOwen custom solution checks off all of the boxes, takes the guesswork out of treatment planning, reduces treatment time and appointments, and lets the team best support the orthodontist. If you haven't already, I suggest you check them out. You can get more information as well as a special offer on our website. Just go to pplpractice.com and click our Partner tab. Welcome to the Golden Age of Orthodontics. I'm Leon Klempner, retired, board-certified orthodontist. I am the Director of Orthodontics at Mount Sinai Hospital here in New York, part-time faculty at both Harvard and Montefiore Ortho programs, and I currently serve as the President of the New York State Society of Orthodontists. And when I'm not doing that, I'm the CEO of People in Practice. So I practice, as I said, about 40 years before co-founding People in Practice with my daughter, and my partner and my podcast co-host, Amy Epstein. Welcome, Amy.
Thank you. Great to be here as always. My background's marketing and public relations, and we got together to be able to bring those high-level strategies and tactics to the business of orthodontics, where it works really well. About 15 years ago, we started the business, and it's been going wonderfully since. My dad mentioned he's a retired orthodontist, and you spend a lot of time teaching now, right? And
I do.
I heard that at Mount Sinai, you have some additional project that you're doing now, kind of out of scope of the usual.
Yeah. So, I have a faculty position at the medical school, Mount Sinai Medical School here in Manhattan. And one of the things that I've learned is that there's very little dental education to the medical students. And the way it manifests itself here in New York is that we take a lot of kids to the OR for early childhood caries. So I've been pushing some sort of just education in order to get our medical colleagues knowledgeable so they could provide some of that. In any event, I got a lot of stuff on my plate. And a lot of projects going on. And so I use a project manager to help me manage it. I'm using OmniFocus, basically. But I think without that, I'd be lost.
Yep. First of all, so much for retirement. Second of all, I am on the board of a nonprofit daycare center, essentially. And we can see that in the kids, that the project that you're working on or the grant that you're writing for the study that you're looking to do, we can see that in the kids that come, and they will often have to raise funds to get these kids emergency dental treatment, because they have to go to the OR, and it's all preventable. And it's sad that these kids have to go through that when this is really about education. So anyway, going back to your, you have a lot on your plate, and you do always really, you're very good at looking at systems and tools that make life better. My calendar actually is the one that you recommended, I don't know how many years ago. I use Fantastic Health to integrate all my calendars and all that stuff. But you are always looking at systems and tools so that you can do the things that you actually want to do, which is a great segue to today's conversation. Because like you mentioned in the open, we're unpacking how one orthodontist redesigned her care delivery to make her practice more manageable. So today we're thrilled to have Dr. Kristen Knecht on the show. Dr. Knecht is a board-certified orthodontist, and she's a key opinion leader for KLOwen, and she's known for combining clinical precision with a holistic, airway-focused approach to care. She's trained at UConn, and now she's leading a rapidly growing practice in the Houston area. She's completed more than 500 KLOwen custom cases and brings a lot of real-world data on how customization improves not only the treatment for the patient, but also the practice performance. So thank you for being here, Kristen. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So, Kristen, you went to UConn. I went to Tufts. And years ago, when I was in school, we had some lectures with Charlie Burstone, one of the icons. And what comes to mind when I think about UConn versus Tufts, which gave me a great clinical education, but the UConn students, the Tufts students in their pocket, we had maybe a pen with our ID and maybe a ruler. The UConn students had like gauges to measure, ounces, and they had like data that was like, beyond. We didn't know what was going on when Charlie was speaking, to be honest with you. But anyway, I appreciate you being here. But you opened your practice in 2020, right? An interesting time, but you scaled pretty quickly over the first few years. And as I said, once you scale, sometimes, the schedule could take control over you. And particularly for our residents that are listening or those that are just starting out, tell us, what were the most challenging things that you had to deal with about running your practice?
Yeah. So, I opened a startup. So in general, there's a lot of challenges with, just trying to figure out like the size of the practice. How many chairs do I place? Like, how big is it going to grow? Can I afford to put all of these chairs? And, am I going to start to fill them in a reasonable amount of time? So I kind of settled on like a middle number. I put 5 treatment chairs and 2 consult room chairs in the office. And it just started to grow much faster than I expected. And so, as that happened, I was, especially with a startup, you're used to like this really slow build. So you can really tinker with your cases. You can focus on all the details. You can make sure that your bonding's perfect and you have extra time. So you're not really focusing on how to be efficient. I wasn't even considering how many times I was seeing patients. It wasn't even on my radar. Well, now fast forward 3 years in, and if you're growing at like 40 or 50% every year, it starts to catch up to you pretty quickly. And you start to notice a lot of bottlenecks and you're like, oh my gosh, how do I have all these patients over extended treatment time? I thought that I was more efficient than I actually am. And it's not until you really start to analyze your own data that I think that you start to see all of the issues that are arising. And for me, the biggest thing was like, how do I continue to grow, but provide the same level of care if I'm seeing 60 patients or I'm seeing 20 patients? And I wanted to make sure that as I grew, that level of care and attention to detail didn't falter at all.
So when you realized that you needed to evaluate things based on your growth, how did you start identifying where you could make meaningful change and have enough impact from those changes?
Yeah, so I knew, one of the things that I saw firsthand is I had a friend that we went to residency together. He ended up buying a practice in Connecticut and the guy was retiring. And so he was going to have to absorb ultimately a 2-doctor practice and he didn't want to hire another associate. So him and I were at meetings one year and the whole focus was like indirect bonding and seeing how could we free up doctor time. And I was kind of helping him in the research part because I knew that I was just like a few years behind pretty much. And so watching him do that and see that he was able to ultimately phase out his partner, not hire someone else, and what he was spending on a lab bill in a huge practice was still much less than what he would pay an associate was really impressive. And when you start to think about some of the bottlenecks, or at least for me in practice, the biggest problem was my bondings, especially because I had developed this habit, whether it was, good or bad, but one, I came from corporate dentistry, so same day starts were a huge thing. And then when you open a startup, you have nothing but time. So if a case is just a simple class 1 crowding case, like, of course I'm going to put braces on right then and there. I have no one else in the clinic. But as the office gets busier, your staff wants to kill you when you do that. So being able to just do a scan and send that off to KLOwen to do my digital setup and schedule the bondings, these hour blocks of time now don't require me. Because that was where I would struggle. Like, I would get stuck in a consult, or I'd have another appointment that doesn't go as well. I can't go check the brackets in time. And then it's just like dominoes where everything gets off track. So by standardizing that whole process, it frees up tons of time. I've done mornings where I just went in and did like 6 or 8 KLOwen bonds, and I have not gotten that much admin stuff done on any other day because they didn't need me. I just went over at the end and checked everything.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. So Kristen, talking about staff wanting to kill you, I've been there many, many times. And, I'll come back from a meeting, with an idea about integrating some tool or making some change. And I'd always get like some pushback. Because staff typically, in my experience, they're in a routine. They know what they need to do. They come and they do it. And then anything that shakes that up is going to, in my experience, I get pushback or I get resistance. Now, you introduced indirect bonding. I mean, going from direct bonding to indirect bonding, that is a monumental change. So I'm just curious, like, what was it like bringing your staff on board, and how did they adapt and adjust to it in terms of how you moved forward?
So I think my staff handled it extremely well, but at the end of the day, I think it's all how the provider positions it to them. So, I told them, look, we've got a great team. We have plenty of runway for growth if we switch to this. So we don't need to hire new staff. We don't need to even start considering hiring someone else to help me in the practice. So everything gets to stay the same way that it is. And then it gives you more autonomy. Instead of having to wait for me to come over, the parents are awkwardly staring at you like, when is she coming to check these brackets? They're putting like a paper towel or something over it so the lights don't cure them. They can complete the appointment start to finish without meeting me. And I think if you position it in a way that empowers them and they buy into it, then they're excited. I also didn't give them the option. I wasn't like, hey, by the way, we're just going to try this new thing. I said, this is what we're going to do so that we can continue to provide the best care possible for our patients. It's more accurate. It's more efficient. And this is what we're doing. And I did tell them, like, don't get frustrated. It's something new. Of course, there's going to be a learning curve, but I promise once you get the hang of it, you're all going to thank me and be thrilled with this. And now they would never go back. Like, if there's a random direct bond case on the schedule, they're not thrilled about it. They don't want to do it.
Yeah.
So let me rewind for a second. And you were, in your storyline where you're evaluating ways to enhance efficiency, and you're, there's somebody that is a friend who's kind of ahead of you, and you're seeing his decision making. Was there a specific time or milestone or that where you decided to make this change, or was it organic for you? Tell us about that, from research to implementation, what was going on?
Yeah. So the first year and a half, I wasn't full time in my practice. I was splitting my time between my corporate job and my private office. And so the amount of growth I saw in my first full year of being there was a little bit, it was beyond exciting, but also a little bit alarming in the sense that I was like, okay, if this happened in 1 year of me devoting all my time, what's going to happen in 5 years or 3 years? And I was trying to get ahead of it a little bit because I kind of saw the direction, and I was hoping that my practice continued to grow at that rate. But I knew that it was only going to get harder to implement change. The bigger my office was, the busier we were. So I kind of found a sweet spot where I waited until the summer went by, because I didn't think implementing a new system in like the heart of the summer when it was super busy was going to set my team up for success. So I waited until the fall of 23. So I did plan it. It was on my radar for probably 6 months where, I told the rep, I was like, I'm 100% in. I'm just timing this where I think that I'm going to be successful and my team is going to be successful. And I knew that I needed things to just die down a little bit and for the schedule to calm down. And that would be a better time to implement something new.
That makes sense. And so, so then when you did that, what did you see? What were some of the benefits? I mean, you clearly went all in, and you've done 500 cases, and so it's working for you, right? So what were some of the benefits that you saw in the practice?
So the way that my schedule opened up was amazing. I kept, going out to my front desk. I'll have this list that we print from the practice management software that's like needs appointment. So I have one person that's designated to that. And I kept thinking that she was dropping the ball and she wasn't following up on the needs appointment list, because within 6 months, my schedule was starting to change and open up a ton. And what was interesting is I wasn't even utilizing the system to the full extent at this point. I was still doing like a mix of what I was doing with my traditional brackets. And by that, I mean, I wasn't spacing out the appointment intervals quite how I should have been. And I was still just noticing so much more time in the schedule. And that came from a couple things. We were having less emergencies, less broken brackets. I think I attribute that because we were really well isolating, like following a very clear system. Everyone was really thoroughly trained, like using Enola, because with indirect bonding, if you don't follow like a very specific system, it can go awry quick. And, so we were seeing less broken brackets. The adjustment schedule was improving a ton. And then just the time in my schedule was changing substantially. I was having more time to spend with the consults, which was important to me, to make sure that I was making a thorough diagnosis and connecting with my patients without having to feel like I had to run out of the clinic to go check brackets.
So, Kristen, Amy and I started People in Practice, and we pride ourselves on data. I mean, it's just that's just our, particularly Amy. She's like data, and it's important in all areas. So I don't want to put you on the spot, but so if I'm an ortho listening to this, thinking to myself, well, that's a big change. Number one. Number two is a lab fee here compared to just putting brackets on. That's a significant impact on my P&L. So could you share with us, I know you saved some time in the clinic. You're saying that it freed up some time. Is there any data that you could share with those orthodontists that are considering moving towards indirect bonding system like KLOwen?
Yeah, for sure. So, a big one is everyone always talks about the lab bill, right? Like, you're going to spend $400 to $500 on this indirect bonding case. But prior to using KLOwen, I was finishing cases in 20 to 21 visits. Looking back, that is insane to me. But if you actually look at the gauge data, that's pretty comparable. I think we all seem to think that we're a lot more efficient than we really are in the grand scheme of things. But then when you pull the numbers, they don't lie. So I went from, 20 to 21 appointments to about 12 and a half. And I mean, that to me is a huge savings. So I've more than covered my lab bill. And, that was a huge thing or like a mental thing that I told myself going in because I knew that it was going to be more expensive, right? So I pretty much decided I'm going to raise my fees $200 or $250, so almost half the lab bill. And then if I shave off one appointment, it's paid for itself. But if it makes my life easier and my work life better, then it's kind of a no-brainer. Like I didn't go into it thinking that I was going to increase my bottom line as much as I did. But I think anyone that's contemplating it, like if you approach it that way, like I'm just going to increase my fees a tiny bit, and then all I have to do is shave off one visit, and it's very easy to justify. The other thing that was pretty huge for me is repos. So I would repo, 3 or 4 brackets per case. I would schedule a pan and repo appointment, and it was this like 40-minute appointment. I would take the x-ray, really analyze, and I always felt like I had plenty to repo. And then now that's another huge schedule savings. I don't schedule that appointment anymore. I just have a quick pan and adjust, and I maybe move one bracket on a case. Especially, it's going down even more the more that I've used CBCT root integration, because it's so accurate. But I mean, that's a huge time savings, to not have those pan and repo appointments. We used to only allow those to get scheduled in a certain column because they required more doctor time. And so just all of these appointments that you're now shortening starts to give your schedule, a ton of room. And then, another big one, just from a numbers standpoint, my revenue per visit was just under 300. And then with KLOwen now, it's just under 500.
Wow.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, that's a pretty huge jump.
Yeah. I was going to mention that, for those data-driven orthos out there that are measuring, profit, per visit, that's a significant change. But, I talk to orthos all the time about incorporating indirect bonding into their system. And many of them have told me that, I tried it on a couple of cases, but I didn't see, how that was really saving me visits or whatever. But it sounds like unless you are committed and go all in on this, that you're not going to see the benefit. Do you feel the same way?
100%. I dabbled in Light Force, and my experience wasn't great because I didn't do enough cases to get over the learning curve and like over the hump of the bonding, like just the bonding technique for my staff. Like you can't do one of them a week and expect your staff to be proficient at something. It's got to be something that they start to do over and over and day in and day out. And now they're faster at doing a KLOwen bond by far than they would be at doing a direct bonding case, but they have the system down. And so you have to get past that learning curve. And then the other aspect of it is it takes time, I think, as an orthodontist to kind of rewire your brain and trust that this system is very accurate, and it is more accurate than you putting the brackets on there. So, you should space out the intervals, the appointment intervals. You need to let the wires work and kind of not try to overdo things. Honestly, like I was seeing people too frequently and not really doing anything meaningful at the appointments. So until you get to those points, you're not going to really see all of the benefits. So I think it's very hard to have a schedule that's like partially indirect and then partially traditional. I saw the biggest change when most of my traditional cases, had been debonded, and I could really just work on honing in all of the systems and efficiencies for an indirect bonding system.
Yeah. And you mentioned, there are choices when going with indirect bonding, and you've chosen KLOwen. It sounds like you're very happy. I'm just curious, like, why? What is it about KLOwen that, attracted you in the first place or keeps you a client?
So for one, I liked that, compared to like using DIBS AI or a 3M system, you still have a semi-custom bracket system. So it's not fully custom like Lightforce, but I also don't feel like you need that. There's ways that they make it, I think, just as custom with like changing the angle at the base of the bracket with glue and, more details than we need to go into. But you also have all options. So I'm thinking for me, the next step to really hone in my efficiencies is switching to self-ligating. So now you've got the option of having this custom system that can either be self-ligating metal, traditional twin. They have a great ceramic bracket. And when you compare it to just Lightforce, it's only ceramic. Personally, I hate ceramic brackets. So the last thing that I want is an entire practice of ceramic brackets. So that was a huge deciding factor for me. I knew that even when I was trying Lightforce, that it was never going to be something that I'd put like every teenager in. I was thinking more of like, let me test this out for my ceramic cases. But I just wasn't happy enough with the support and then the bonding that I was having a lot of like breakages of the actual brackets. So for me, it wasn't the right fit. And when I found KLOwen and, could switch to twin, that was to me a no-brainer because my patients don't know any different. I felt like if you tried switching a whole practice to Lightforce and in a year you decided you didn't want to do that anymore, how do you explain that to the parents that had one kid that started and you were like, oh yeah, we don't offer that one anymore. Now we're back to the metal. But to all the parents and patients, it's a twin bracket. So they couldn't tell the difference. And I didn't give people options either. I've heard of some people saying like, you can have your traditional way or you can have a custom bracket. I just pretty much was like, this is our bracket system. Because it's custom, it's going to take, 3 to 4 weeks to get your custom case back from the lab, and then we'll put your braces on.
So as we close up, I wanted to ask you, you are out of startup mode, on the tail end of the hump of startup mode. What do you have any advice for orthodontists who are just starting out and, whether they're buying a practice or specifically if they're starting from scratch and get to spec their own technologies and vendors and everything themselves? What would you say to them?
I would tell them to not be afraid to utilize these technologies early on, mainly because we're seeing how quickly, things are changing. But the other piece of it is I know people that have opened startups and kind of gone all in with KLOwen or all in with an indirect bonding system. And it actually allowed them to continue to grow, but need a lot less staff. And as I think most practicing orthodontists will tell you, that staffing is one of the biggest challenges. So if you can find a way to rely on humans less, that's a huge benefit. So if by mastering an indirect bonding system, you could, keep one assistant for substantially longer and not have to keep adding staff, that itself is very valuable because I think we've all had staffing struggles. Like if you've practiced long enough, you've dealt with them. And I think that the more time that you have, the easier it is to learn and implement systems and train. I felt like I could have implemented mine earlier once I started. And I definitely did not want to wait any longer because it would have just been a lot more chaotic, unnecessarily.
Mm-hmm. Well, great. So, thanks for sharing your story with us today. If we have listeners who would like to learn more about you, your practice, KLOwen, or your experience, is there a way that they can reach out?
Yes, they can definitely email me. My personal email is Knecht, so KKNECHT 87@gmail.com.
Okay, that sounds great. And for those listening today that might be interested in learning more about KLOwen, you can visit pplpractice.com, our website, and go to the Partners tab, and you'll see that there's an opportunity for our podcast listeners to receive a special offer from KLOwen. If you fill out the form there, somebody will get in touch with you. Kristen, thank you. Much luck to you moving forward as you grow your practice. We'll keep our eye on you. We appreciate you being here today and sharing your story.
Thanks for having me.
Yep. Thanks, Kristen.
You can subscribe or download other episodes of the Golden Age of Orthodontics on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you enjoyed it, we appreciate you telling a colleague. And for more information about people in practice, you can visit our website at pplpractice.com.
So I'm going to take off my orthodontic hat. I'm putting on my marketing hat. If you're using indirect bonding like KLOwen, you need to market it. It's a benefit to your patients to be coming less often. This is a big issue, giving them back their time. So we're moving to a point where this will be the standard of care. So, you hear me talk about the digital practice. You hear Chris Benson talking about it. You hear most people that are in the know are telling you that the profession will be moving in this, and those practices that are incorporating these types of technologies that are of benefit to the patients are going to grow. So keep that in mind. And if you'd like help doing that, shoot me an email, leon@pplpractice.com. And remember, always remember this, for forward-thinking orthodontists, it has never, and I mean never, ever been a better time to be an orthodontist. We're in the golden age. Take advantage of it. We'll see you next time. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Golden Age of Orthodontics podcast. Subscribe to our podcast on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or visit our website at pplpractice.com.